Hi there, and welcome to a little lesson in Motherhood MBA, how to get your master's in education with your home. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I tell you what, it's a plan that works. So I am sending you this video because you joined the email list, so congratulations, you're part of the tribe and you get all the goodies that come with that, and this is just one of them. So this is a communication plan. And I don't know about you, but not having one of these really presents some issues. And it presented some issues for me for many years until I started following a plan and deciding maybe I should look into creating a plan for myself if my communication is not working all that well. I mean, we create plans for so many things in our life, and we don't bat an eye at it, right? Like if I was going to bake a cake, I'd probably have a step-by-step plan on how to do that. Something simple as that. If I was going to have a plan to go to school or college, then I'd probably lay some steps out, right? People make a workout plan. We make meal plans. I mean, we make plans for so many things. And communication really is the top thing that's kind of going on in our homes on many different levels. And yet often we walk in without a plan. And when we think of it in that context, it kind of seems a little crazy because we do create plans for so many different things that are, in comparison, I would say less important because it's the overall quality of your life and the overall quality of your intimate spaces, which is huge, huge. So I'm going to walk you through some steps today on how to create your plan. And you put your own personal touch on it, whatever kind of works for you. And I'll give you some tips on some things that I do, but you know your house better than I do. You know the house needs better than I do. So I'm just giving you a template and a way for you to start really thinking about this and engaging in what is a communication plan and how do I execute it. And then you go from there, right? You make it your own and you create a plan that's just spot on for you. So I won't take too much of your time because I know that moms are big into time. So I'm going to move through some of these slides and explain a couple of things to you. All right, are you ready? Let's go. So they always say communication, 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 but did they give you a plan? No. So we hear that this is the most important thing in our house, and yet, again, we don't really plan for it, right? So they were right. Communication, communication, communication is really, really important, right? But let's have some real talk. I mean, beyond romance and beyond when communication is kind of flowing and things are flourishing and they're new. But I mean, in the time where you have to really have some negotiations in your house, where, you know, you have kids or you have a mortgage or you have car payments and you have goals and things like that that you're sharing with somebody else, and then a house. So communication becomes, paramount at that point. So communication is really, really key, right? And sometimes they also say that love is all you need, and love is really great and it's amazing, but that's totally wrong, okay? We definitely need more than that to sustain something. So we need a strategy, right? So that's really the word we should be using. So when they say communication, 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 maybe they should say strategy, 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 right? So the 3 steps to the communication plan are investigation, right? And I'll go through that. The second one is approach, and then the third one is clarity, all right? So the first one we're going into is investigation, and the good news is we're really good at this already. Women are serious investigators. I mean, I don't know if you've had some friends that have stalked some people, or maybe that was you. I don't know. Maybe you figured out some things about guys. I mean, we're constantly going in our heads and trying to figure things out. Why did they say this? Why did they make this face? Why did they not do this? I mean, we're always doing this investigative work. So we're really good at it. We're really good at kind of being in our headspace and working in that area and deciding on what something means. Sometimes we make up a story about what it means, and it's totally wrong, but we're used to going inward and doing this work. So we're really equipped to do this investigation. So if you ever question yourself, don't, because we're good at this. So you already have something really on your side right from the beginning, okay? So here's what we look into when we start doing our investigative work. Okay, so the first thing we want to look at is our own communication story, right? So how were you taught to communicate? And is this creating some issues in your house? So I'll give you an example of my communication story and how I went in and started looking into changing it. So my communication story was that I grew up in a house where we didn't really communicate. We didn't really talk about, like, I don't know, how we felt about things, how we were struggling with things, because I grew up in a house with a single mom and 6 kids, and my dad abandoned my family. So we didn't have a lot of time to really talk about those things. We really just went on survival mode. So I learned to communicate in survival mode. I learned to not over communicate and keep a lot of things inside internally because, there just wasn't time for that. And I always felt like, well, I guess people really wouldn't care what I was thinking internally. What's the point? So I brought these things into my intimate space with my husband, and I showed up as, pretty much somebody who was really strong, right? Somebody who was super, I guess you can say, the single independent type of woman. I had that kind of whole thing going for me, and basically surviving. So every time I was trying to communicate, I was just trying to survive, right? I was just trying to sort of get enough in the conversation or get enough in so where I could preserve myself. I could preserve my feelings and I could preserve kind of where I was coming from, right? So if if you grew up in a home like mine, you really understand that. But maybe you grew up in a home that over communicated. You guys talked about everything. All your mess was out there for everybody to hear and everybody to see. And maybe it made you uncomfortable. Maybe you were in a house where communication was telling lies, or keeping things inside. We don't really talk about those things, even though all this stuff's happening in our house, we kind of lie about it. People grow up in so many different spaces and community spaces as we're growing up. And we don't realize how much it affects the way that we communicate when we get into our own communities, right? The ones we've created. And that includes like our workspace and any other space. Is just, what is your communication story? How do you show up in communication? How do you show up when communication is there's friction in the communication? How do you react to that? Do you start going on the offensive? Are you somebody who's very meek and sort of gives in and then withholds and feels very resentful later? So you want to get really curious about what is your whole communication story and where has it led you to this point? What works for you in communication? What do you feel like you get good responses from? And what has really taken you away from those spaces and the intimacy that you really crave? Because we all do really crave intimacy. We just don't always play well in the sandbox. So it becomes a problem for us. And you also have a partner, right? And that's what we're talking about today is partnership and communication. So your partner also has a communication story. So once you get clear on your communication story, right, and how you're showing up and what's working and what's not working, then you can look into your partner's communication story. And that doesn't mean to say you have to ask them 20 questions. Like, you can basically just get a feel for it without digging and prying. And if you know your in-laws, then you probably see the dynamic of what the communication story was and how it was presented. So it creates some empathy, right? Which is really critical when we're communicating. We need to understand where the other person is coming from, why they communicate the way that they do, and if it needs to be tweaked or changed for the current communication circle that we're in right now. And I always call it the sacred circle. Communication space is so sacred. And we have to really know how we're entering into that space. And we can't pretend that our story has nothing to do with the way that we communicate. So the first thing you want to investigate are those two things. What is your communication story? What is your partner's communication story? And how are you two coming together based on that story? And what new story can you create, right? What new possibilities can you start creating as far as rituals and habits and the way that you speak to one another? But the first step is really noticing it, right? This was a huge game changer for me. And it created some things that I didn't know about my husband. I started learning much more about him. And so I was able to go in and even tweak this plan even more, because the more you know, the more power you have in creating this plan and making it just perfect for you. Okay, so that's the first one. You want to go inside and kind of do that mind work. The next thing you want to look at is, what are the triggers you want to avoid in communication? So once you've started, the juices are, going around and you're starting to uncover some things in the communication story, you're going to notice, oh, these are the triggers. When he comes in with this and I come in with this based on, what I've learned, so you can forgive yourself for that. this is when friction takes place. This is the largest point for us of when we're not communicating and we're going after one another, or we're just trying to get one up on one another, or we're just trying to be right. And at that point, we're not really listening. So you want to be really aware of how the mood feels, like what vibes is it giving off. And once you can start really pinpointing these triggers, you can avoid the triggers, right? You can plan for the triggers and really figure out a method to get out of that space. And you can just try to ease the triggers, right? Try to ease your response to those things. So if you're having a trigger moment where two people are very stubborn, for instance, like me and my husband would get into this issue where one trigger was he would say something that I felt kind of, offended by. And then I might say, hey, I feel attacked or I feel offended. And my husband would get very, he would want to give up. He would just say, well, I can't say anything right. I can't do anything right. And so for me, at that point, I had to really realize that what I was saying to him felt like I was attacking him. Even though that wasn't my intention, but he felt as though I was attacking him. So I want to come in and just say it a little differently because language really does matter. And when I say that I'm feeling threatened by that, or I feel like you're, basically I don't feel safe in this space, like these are words that for my husband, I know are really big trigger points, just that language. Because for him, it makes him feel as if I feel really, threatened by him. And that's something that he doesn't like because he's like, I'm totally not trying to do that. So that's a trigger for us, right? So I've learned to back away from that language and to really try to articulate not so much what he's doing, but more or less what I am getting out of it. And even if I need to say, I know this is not what's really going on, but here's what's happening in my head. And this has been a really great visualization for him because I'm saying, here's the story I'm creating in my head. Here's what's coming up for me. And I know it's so crazy and I get that. But here it is, here's the story. And if I say anything, from this point that's making you feel a certain way or the words that I use, just let me know and I can really try my best to work on that. It's all about trying to just say, if this is a point of tension for us, then we're both willing to come to the table and work on it a little bit. And for me, I was always the one who was more stubborn in that area. My husband is somebody who kind of, he'll be willing. But I was always sort of stubborn. Like if I give this up, then I'm giving up my life or, that I'm letting him have his way and I can't do that. But you learn to start letting go of that crap because it's not serving you. It's not serving your communication space. So you've got to be willing, right? You have to be willing to say, it doesn't have to go this way every single time. I can do something different and I can make a different choice. And just knowing that and being aware of that and then looking at that language and what pinpoints those moments for you is revolutionary. It can really start changing the entire communication game between you and your partner, okay? And then the third thing you want to do is just look at what works best, okay? So what is the best approach for you? What is the best state of mind for you to be in when you get into a communication space? What works? What works best for you as an individual? Because for some people, one thing might work, but for you, something else might work. So you want to look at your life, right? Your personal life and the points in your personal life where this is making the most sense for you. And basically when you can step into communication space, when you're allowed to step into it, and it seems to be things are effortless. You guys are communicating and you're not really working for it. It's like you guys are kind of open. So you want to be aware of those times in your life. When are those times where communication is just at ease? It's not something that you're finding friction and things that work. And you want to find these spaces for, a few reasons. One, because you want to remind yourself that it's possible. I think in communication, we get so overwhelmed that we just go, oh, it's never working. It just never works. And we have this internal dialogue that's really just not true because there are times in our life where we are communicating. Now, it may only be once a day, okay, that if you're in that space, and that is a bad space to be in, and I understand that. But there's probably a few times in your day where communication is not strained. It's feeling, and even if it's just a small exchange, but just notice that energy. So what works best for you guys? What you notice is the times you come together and things work best. Maybe when there's a bit of a crisis or something has gone wrong, that's the time where you guys come together and you work in unity, right? Maybe it's a time where you guys are having something new in your life. There's something exciting down the road. I know when me and my husband were looking for my house together, our communication, was working well then because we like working towards growth. And that's what I noticed about he and I, is that we're both really growth oriented. So we like and we get excited about those things. And when there's excitement, then communication flows. So you just really want to notice those things, right? So investigate. And, we're really good at these things. If you can start investigating these 3 things, I promise you it will start changing for you. And you're going to just start noticing your partner more. You're going to notice their communication patterns more. And you're going to be more appreciative of how to step in. Okay? Hi, so I'm back. And the next thing we're looking at is approach. Okay? So approach is, asking, am I cleared to land? Like, am I good? Can I show up? Is that something that we're both good with? And, it's not that you need permission. And sometimes I get that communication just has to happen. So those times, like, okay, so we've got to communicate. This is going on. But in the times where you can actually kind of plan it out, the times where you have a calculated thing that you really want to bring up, this is a really good method, okay? So you really want to look in the approach, how you're stepping in, not based on your past, because we already talked about that, and you're going to clean up that mess, right? But how you are stepping in right now, in the present moment, in your life, in the current day-to-day grind that you're living in. Am I clear to step into communication? And you want to ask yourself this question, right? Am I good? Is everything good in here? And when we look at the slides, you'll see kind of what I'm talking about. But this is a question I ask myself a lot. Am I good to step in? Can I handle myself stepping in? Am I going to step in with a purpose and a good intention, or am I stepping in to be right? So these are things you want to check yourself with, okay? All right, so it's the prep that makes all the difference, right? Prep yourself before you step in. So what do you want to look at? First of all, you want to look at the time of day. If you have this luxury, this is a big one. So maybe when your husband, gets home, or your partner gets home, or your wife gets home, like that might not be a good time to approach them. And maybe every single time you have an issue and you've been thinking about it all day, that's the time you go after it. And then we're wondering why our communication is strained. So you want to think of when is a good time of day. And again, since you're doing this investigative work, you're going to start noticing these things, which is awesome. So pick a good time of day that things are settled. Not everything in your house is crazy, especially if you have something that you're wanting to really bring up and you're wanting to really have that intimate communication with. We've got to be very mindful of that, because we need to come to people when they're at a space where they're going to be the most receptive to us. And I know that might seem like, well, why should I have to do that? Or why am I giving this up? Or why? Because we're the communication leaders in our house. This is why. We're the ones who are taking the reins. I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this video, you're a woman. So you're a woman who came on to listen to something like this. Most men don't listen to things like this. Most men are not getting invested in the relationships in this capacity because we're better at the communication game than they are. Why? Because as little girls, we've started from communication tribal circles since we've been young. So we have to understand that it's not, oh, they're getting something and I'm not getting anything. You've got to let go of those things because we're just better at the job. Like in all seriousness, we are better at creating the space and making this a flourishing space. And trust me, once they start feeling the effects of it, they're going to buy in. But we've got to create the atmosphere. And yes, that is on us, okay? But if you can make your peace with that, I promise you, you get goodies. You get all kinds of rewards, and you have a man who's anticipating your needs, which is what I have today. And it's amazing, guys. So stay with me, okay? All right, so find the best time of day that works for them, preferably. That is something that I've started doing, and it's made a huge difference in the energy, in the exchange, in my outcome. I mean, the whole thing. So think of these things, okay? Especially if it's a biggie that you're bringing up, right? You don't want to bring it up in a space where there's already a lot of tension. 2, you want to think of what type of meeting am I having? Am I having, a heart-to-heart where I've, built up a lot of resentment and now I'm ready to speak on it, right? I'm ready to speak my truth. But that's going to dictate where you're doing it and how you're doing it and what time of day you're doing it. So if it's a small exchange, then sure, it can be, when things are maybe at dinner or something along those lines. But if you're doing a meeting that's more of a heart-to-heart, you want to have it in a heart-to-heart space atmosphere in your home. And normally for me, that's in my bedroom. So if I want to have this kind of conversation with my husband, I make sure that I am bringing the subject matter into the context it belongs, right? So I want to make sure that I understand the type of meeting I'm having. You can also have another kind of meeting, which is like a family meeting. And that could be, you can have a kind of a formal family meeting where you're getting things checked off the list. But I would even say add some fun in there as well if you're doing something like that. Meetings are not always like the things you want to be showing up to, okay? Like no one wants to come to a meeting where you have expectations of them and they know it. And, most people don't want to show up to that. So you want to create an atmosphere that is inviting, that people want to show up and communities want to work together, right? And you and your husband or your partner, that's a community. So that's the smaller scale community. And then the larger scale community is your family. So think of the type of meeting you're going to be having. And the subject matter is going to dictate that a little bit, okay? The next thing, and I would say this is probably the most important, is the mess really clean, okay? So this means, have I dealt with my mess first? If I am upset about something and I have not communicated to my partner and I've let the story run in my head for weeks, okay? And some people let stories run for years, as we know. So this is a lot of work that we've got to do before we step into a communication space, to that sacred space I spoke about before. And you have got to be honest with yourself in saying, is the mess really cleaned? Or am I going to set up this time of day? Am I going to set up the type of meeting I want to have? Am I going to do all this work and then I'm going to step in and I'm going to be pissed off? Or I'm going to bring in all my energy that I've had around this area that hasn't been addressed. You've got to make that decision because that's a critical choice that you're going to make. And this is why people's communication gets so strained, because there's so much mess and emotion around something. And then we bring it, and the way that we bring it is not in a problem-solving manner. It's in a manner that's accusatory. So we've got to really, really check this, because at the end of the day, we want to get out of it what we want. We want to be happy. We want to have a flourishing relationship. We want to have somebody who anticipates our needs. These are the things that we want. And if we want those things, then we have got to make sure our mess is cleaned as much as we can get it clean before we step in. And you've got to ask yourself that question, like I was saying before. Am I ready to step in? Am I ready? Am I willing? Am I open? Have I let things go? Have I healed things? And if those answers are all no, then you cannot step in, especially if it's something that's a very big request you're making, or it's a heart-to-heart that you're healing, right? So you've got to really look into this third step. And I cannot stress it enough, because I know that, a lot of men complain about women coming in with their to-do list and their tally list and all their blame and all their stuff. And a lot of times, I hate to admit it, a lot of the times they are right. That doesn't make your hurt or your pain anything less. What I'm saying is that we're not productive when we step in with this energy. So we want to be productive in communication. That's why we're having this strategy session in the first place, okay? So this is something that will change everything with your communication space, and including with other intimate spaces with your family and with your kids too. I would say do this communication plan with your kids hands down. I do it with mine all the time. All right, I'm back. So let's clear it up real quick. So once you've done those first two things, right? You've done your investigative work, right? You've thought about it. You've realized some things. You've come to some epiphanies. You've had some aha moments, as they say on Oprah. Then you go to the second step and you essentially decide what's going to be your approach, when you're going to approach, how you're going to approach, if you can approach because you're in the appropriate state of mind. Those are huge things to know. I mean, like, they're huge, right? To come in with that type of, like, you've done that work. And people will notice when you've done that work. They will really notice. And they might not understand fully. Like, when I started doing this work, my husband was noticing something different, but I don't think he quite could pinpoint it. But it was different. The energy was different. The expectations were, like, everything was different, right? So trust me, it'll start if you start the ritual. And then once you do it, I would say, like, 7 or 8 times, it just goes on autopilot. And then you're already approaching in this way with communication, which is just like, it's so good. Okay, so the last one is, we're going to clear that up real quick. So you did your work, right? That's amazing. And congratulate yourself for that work. Make sure you go, I've done my work. You don't go around telling everybody like, by the way, just in case, like I've been doing this communication plan and I did my work. Like you don't have to do all that, but feel good about it. Congratulate yourself. Understand that this takes some effort and this is something worthy of you saying, oh, wow, I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of that. That's something I can find honor in, right? All right. So to the last step. This is how you get results. Okay. So number 1, what do you want? What are you looking to get out of this exchange? If it's a heart-to-heart, you may want somebody to apologize to you. You may want somebody to say, you know what, that wasn't my intention, and I'm going to work on this, right? You may want those things. Maybe it's something you want for your house. Maybe it's a new direction you want to take as a family, right? Maybe it's a discipline issue that maybe you've been having some friction over where you think it should be this way and you see it's affecting your kids and maybe your partner doesn't necessarily see that. So you want a different outcome. You want to not necessarily discipline, but maybe correct with a different natural consequence, as I call it in my house, or something along those lines. Maybe you want to shift that. Maybe you want to shift the health in your home. You want people to get on a better health plan because you see that the energy and these things are weighing down your house, but you want everybody on board, and that better start with your partner because they're going to be your top person, right? So these are just a couple examples of maybe what you want, okay? So you want to think about, what do I want out of this exchange? I set up all these parameters. I've set the mood. I've set the tone. What is it that I want to get out of this? What am I looking to get out of this, okay? And you also have to be willing for the next step to give some things up. You have to be willing to say, if they're coming to the table and my partner's coming in and they're trying and they're making an effort, I need to make sure I value that. I need to not walk all over them and trample all over them because I didn't get my expectations. So you've got to really understand how that negotiation works. And a lot of times, I'm going to be totally honest with you, normally, when I do this, I don't only get what I want, but I'll get beyond what I want. And that's the beauty of this work. So don't think, oh my God, I'm going to give up everything. And at first, it might be a struggle. It might be something that you're only getting them to take one little step. But one little step is better than no steps, right? So you've got to really understand that this is a work in progress. It's a practice. It's something that you've got to do a few times in order to get things, unclogged, so to speak, because the communication could be all clogged up and you've got to go in there and do that work, The last one is, do you have clarity in the request, right? So it's not only diamonds that have clarity, right? It is what you're asking of somebody. So oftentimes I would go in and I would ask my husband of something and I would think to myself that I was being clear, right? Oh, he doesn't understand. I got to explain everything to him. Oh, geez, I'd go through this whole thing in my head. But the thing is that men are they tend to be very pragmatic, right? They tend to think very linear. And they want you to be pretty clear in what you're asking for. A lot of times we come in with our emotions attached to our request. And this can draw in some confusion for men. And I mean this in the most literal sense. It draws in confusion for them. Because in their circles, they're not used to communicating like that. When we communicate in our circles as women, we can bring in our requests with emotions, and that actually adds to the pot, right? We like that as women. This is something that's like, ooh, I'm in a good conversation here. We're connecting, we're asking, we're communicating. All this stuff's going on at one time. It's so dynamic, right? And we love it. But for men, they don't. Most of the time, that is something that draws confusion for them. They're unsure of how to approach and how to fit in with that. They don't know how to play in the sandbox with you because they haven't been playing in those kind of sandboxes for their entire life. So we need to make sure we're coming in with a sense of clarity, that we've thought about it, that we've said, here's what I'd like to do. And sometimes, here, you can even write it down. In all honesty, my husband is appreciative when I do that. And I write something down and I try to actually get things out of what I'm asking. Because for him, it's like, okay, now I can understand this. And now I'm part of things, right? And now I can help you. And men, most of the time, they do really want to help you. They want to show up for you and help you, but they're very confused on how to do that. So a lot of times we've got to really lead the way and show them and not sit there and get bogged down in why do I need to explain it? Why do I have to go over this? let go of all of that. You have got to make your peace with understanding that you are the top communicator, and therefore you need to do this work in order to teach your partner to do this work, because we're just more equipped to do the work. Okay? And it's as simple as that. Alrighty. So I'm back. So I hope that you like the communication plan, going through these steps. I'm telling you it works. Hands down, it works. If you do the work, it works. And it teaches you so much. It brings you so much closer to your partner, and you start noticing things within your kids and communication they have with your family. It just goes on autopilot, and your brain is like, whoa, I mean, this is like, I can get a lot of stuff. I can get a lot of stuff that I want. And you start realizing what you get out of it. You start feeling those effects. And the thing is that by leading, you teach. You teach. You've invited somebody in. You haven't demanded that they come in. You did the work, so you didn't say, oh, you do all this work, but I would never do this work, right? Where you cannot leave with that. So we have to make our peace in communication, because communication runs everything. It's the fuel that's running your home and your relationship and your intimate spaces. So we have to treat it like it's a sacred space. And if up until this point you haven't been treating it as if it's a sacred space and doing these things, then that's okay. Forgive yourself. Understand that most of the time we weren't taught this stuff. I had to learn the hard way. Trust me. I mean, I had to really learn the hard way. And it wasn't fun. So now it's fun. Now I step into communication. Before I leave you, I just want to give you two tips, okay? So the first tip is creating the mood. So sometimes when I have meetings with my husband and I have something that I want to talk to him about, I will set up a sexy meeting, and I will, dress for the meeting. I'll dress for the occasion, and I'll let him know. Maybe I could send him an email, or maybe I'll send him a little note or something that's playful. And they show up to those meetings. Not only that, they're right on time. So you can set those meetings up and even say, let's get the kids to sleep early tonight. Let's be a unit and do this so we can have this meeting, have this time together, connecting, communicating, and then having intimate time. And I'm telling you, it makes a huge, huge difference, just even doing that one little thing, because it's a different way to show up to communicate for men. And they like spontaneity. They like something a little bit different. And yeah, so, and it's fun. It really is fun to do things like that, to be playful. So if you're wondering, how do I ease into this? This is a very good way to ease into it. And then you start having it, and then you can expand it out to your family and start the family calendars and plans and things like that. And the second one is probably the biggest thing that I have done to switch up my communication is that I don't give my communication away. I don't give my communication away to my friends anymore. I love my friends. I speak to them about, things that are going on in my life, but I really don't speak to them so much about what's going on in my intimate space with my husband anymore, because when I was talking to them about it, I wasn't talking to him about it. And when I was talking to them about it, we were all coming up with our stories of why something was happening, and then they were adding in, and then I was taking their advice, and then it was a whole mess, and then that's what I brought home to my husband in communication space. That's what I brought into my sacred space with him. So it doesn't work, okay? And I'm not saying get rid of your girlfriends, don't do that. What I'm saying is save some stuff for the person that you really need to work on communication with, because oftentimes we don't need to work on our communication with our girlfriends. It's already there. It's already pretty good, right? We're already willing to go into the deep end of the pool right away, let our emotions fly, and have that time and space with them. But a lot of times we're using so much of that energy, and we're not anchoring any of that back onto our relationship and our intimate space with our partners. So those are the two tips that I shifted those two things in my life. And wow, what a difference that has made. Like, I cannot even tell you. So if you're wondering, how to step into that space, and if you're wondering what you can do as far as your ecosystem goes, what's one little shift you can make in there, that's it, just thinking about it in different contexts. All right. So I'm so happy that you came, and I'm so happy that you have a communication plan now and you have something to take with you. And yeah, I just hope that you totally start executing it, because I just know what it does. I know what it does, and it's good. It's real good. Trust me. So yeah, if you're interested in anything else, I'll be sending you some emails about Motherhood MBA, and it's coming out soon. And yeah, this is just a little snippet of what Motherhood MBA does. We think of things totally different. We step outside of our home and observe it and look at the pieces and decide how everything's going. And then we show up. We get the chance to show up, and we write the rules. We figure it out, and we create our own plans. And we stop listening to other people's whatevers, and we start stepping into the role that we were always meant to step into, which is the top communicator in our house, the one who's leading, the one who's teaching, so that everyone starts following in a space where everybody contributes. We're in a tribal setting, and everyone's there. They're there, they're present, and not everything falls on mom. And if that sounds good to you, stick with me, girl. I got you. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.